Hey everyone, Lee Pacchia here, and you are watching The Business of Law, the only web TV show focusing on the challenges and opportunities facing the legal profession. Something a little different today. My guest is John Corey. He's the founder and president of Greentarget, and his firm just put out a really interesting report focusing on digital and content marketing for law firms. I found the results nothing short of surprising. We're thrilled to have him join us. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Lee.
So I think this is the fourth year that you've put this survey out. Can you talk to us a little bit about how this whole project got started?
Yeah, so we're 4 years into it, like you said. It was in late 2008 and 2009, and the discussion was really starting to intensify around social media. It was happening, obviously, across various industries and forms of business, but in the legal industry, there's a lot of talk about how, you know what, you need to get on blogs, you need to be on LinkedIn, you got to think about Twitter. Facebook is a tool you need to use for alumni and recruiting, and there was so much discussion happening. And we took a step back as a firm and thought to ourselves, no one's measured the extent to which corporate general counsel, the purchasers of legal services, are actually engaging these tools. And no one's delved into that to understand what the implications might be for marketing and business development for law firms. So we thought it was a great opportunity to go out, to do that research, because we specialize in creating this type of research, to create a baseline and then to build on it from there.
Cool. So before we jump into the report, let's do methodology. Who exactly did you poll? How many people were involved?
Yeah, so this year we expanded it. So in the fourth year or so, we surveyed corporate in-house counsel on the in-house side. We had roughly 189 respondents, all in-house. And this year we also expanded the survey to include senior law firm marketers and CMOs. Because what we found, Lee, is that over the last several years, the main way that clients are using social media is to consume information. And we've seen that during this time, during the 4-year window that we've been doing the study, that firms have been producing greater amounts, greater volumes of content. So we wanted to understand what investments are they making in content? How are they restructuring their practices and their marketing departments to deliver content? And how's that relationship working? The clients are consuming, the firms are producing content. How is that relationship working today, and how could it be improved upon?
Yeah. And I got to say, the numbers are just really, really interesting. 84% of CMOs plan to make more content this year over last.
Yes.
25% have a documented plan on how they're going to do so. There's a bit of a divide there. What's going on with the law firms who want to create more and more content but don't really have a written down plan how to go about doing something like that?
Yes, it's an interesting question, and I think it's important to realize that producing content is difficult. It's a very difficult job. It's a very difficult business. Well, exactly right. You know firsthand. And law firm CMOs, they have multiple priorities. They are developing strategy with their leadership teams. They are overseeing the brand. They're overseeing business development. They're overseeing communications. They're overseeing events in their offices. They're overseeing their teams. And yes, they're overseeing content, which pervades across, I think, everything that they do. But the problem is that everyone in their firms, okay, personal branding is very important. People understand that credentialing and thought leadership is important to building your personal brand and helping to develop business and to take your career forward. So CMOs find themselves, I think, in a very delicate position. Diplomatically, they need to respond to those requests and make sure that they are being of a service to those attorneys, but they can't do so at a lack of being able to really focus on what is most important strategically, the practices and areas that are most important to the firm.
So to help frame that monumental task that you just outlined, you came up with something called the 80-20 plan. Can you walk us through that?
Yes. So when you think about it, the vast majority of content that firms produce today, it's 80%, it could be 90%. We're calling it the 80-20 rule. But the vast majority is developed out in the field, okay? It's being developed out, you know, with the practices and the industries and across offices. You think about newsletters, you think about client alerts, you think about blogs, you think about firm-branded events. It's being produced in a decentralized fashion. It's almost federalist in nature in many ways. We think that's a good thing. Okay, so the key is to make sure that we're giving those individuals and those practices, you know, the standards and the guidelines and the tools and the training to be as effective as they can be, so that the consistency is there, the reach and the quality of that content. It requires having somebody that really understands content and how to manage it and oversee it. So it's about optimizing the 80%, but really focusing your energy and your purpose on that remaining 20%. Identifying those practices and those industries and those niche areas that are most critical to the brand, and developing some very extraordinary and special content that can really catapult the firm and help it to rise above the pack. Because one of the key findings from the 2014 study is that we are operating in an era of information overload. We are inundating clients today with information. I'll give you one example. You just take blogs in particular. When we did the first study in 2010, we found that the AmLaw 200 were publishing 350 blogs. At the end of 2013, they were publishing roughly 1,100 blogs. So it's almost quadrupled.
Yeah.
But here's what's interesting. The consumption behaviors of the clients have remained fairly steady over the last couple of years, but the volume of content has skyrocketed. So this notion of information overload, and the question that we're all trying to answer and discuss together, is how can firms stand out in this type of an environment?
Not to push you on the spot here, but roughly how many law firms out there have an executive level point person that just focuses on content creation?
Well, when you look at our study, we found that 29% of firms actually say they have a dedicated person that is overseeing content. And those that say they don't said that they didn't have any plans to put a person in place in the coming year.
Fascinating. So you've said before that content makers at law firms need to adopt a corporate journalist mentality. What does that mean?
Well, so you think about that remaining 20%, right? And there's an opportunity there to go out and do something special. And corporate journalism is just a way of thinking about how law firms, like we've seen a lot of their corporate brethren, can act like media companies. Because we know that firms today are sitting on a treasure trove of content, treasure trove of intellectual capacity. So corporate journalism is really about the practice of combining a firm's market intelligence and subject matter expertise with the credibility and the narrative techniques of professional journalism. Now, done well, a corporate journalism approach is about adopting the principles of traditional journalism that make it so credible and interesting, not the least of which is the critical notion that journalists serve its audience above all others. Journalism is a service, and the audience is most important. And again, like I said a few minutes ago, it's about it gives firms the opportunity to act like media companies and to identify and to convey the most compelling stories that they have to share today.
It's fascinating because we're sitting here talking about law firms essentially turning themselves into media companies.
Yes, we are.
I don't think many people anticipated conversations like these 5 years ago. That said, the demand is there. The reasons for going into this stuff, it's apparent to a lot of people. Why, in your opinion, aren't more law firms jumping into this head first? What's holding them back?
Well, I think this is new terrain for law firms. You know, we've seen corporations do this with a fair amount of success over the last several years, and I think professional services are starting to really move in this direction. And I think professional services firms, law firms in particular, have far greater amounts of perspective and points of view and quality content that just isn't being tapped today. Now, firms are doing a great job, don't get me wrong. I mean, their client alerts, their newsletters, those traditional forms of content, they're viewed today as being the most valuable by clients. But we think there's an opportunity to take the alerts and the blogs and the newsletters and the existing forms of content and to come up with new content vehicles that complement those forms but can really help the firms to stand out. It's a less is more approach, of course, but really focusing in a few key areas to do something really special.
Let's talk about platforms. There's a ton of places out there in which law firms can place their content and build an audience. Out of the ocean of opportunity, as it were, which platforms jump out at you as being particularly useful to what law firms want to accomplish? Is it all about Twitter, or is there something else out there they should be thinking about?
Well, the number one tool in the last 4 years that we've been doing the study, hands down, is LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been the star of the study.
That?
Well, it comprises the greatest concentration of lawyers anywhere on the social web today. There are more lawyers on LinkedIn than anywhere else. And what's interesting to me is that when we did the study in 2010, there was a very strong generational divide. So we saw lawyers in their 30s, for example. They were the power users. 84% of lawyers in their 30s, in-house counsel, were very active on the platform. And then as we got into subsequent age groups, counsel in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, we saw a very gradual and steep decline. Now you fast forward to 2014, and it's a much more even, consistent, and mainstream usage across age groups. The younger lawyers, those in their 30s, their usage is stabilized, come down a little bit, but the lawyers in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, the older age groups in particular, they've come up. So there are more lawyers on it than anywhere else on the social web, and they're using it in multiple ways professionally. They're using it to build connections. They're using it to join groups. They're using it to consume news and information. You know, we've talked before about the invisible user trend, how they're using it to consume and read and listen, but they're not necessarily giving any public indication they're doing so. They're using it to stay abreast of job opportunities. So they're using it in many, many ways. And it's, you know, and it's interesting. And I'll tell you that firms are making some pretty substantial investments in LinkedIn. We found that 68% of firms said they had a LinkedIn strategy, and only 25% said they had a larger content strategy. 68% have a LinkedIn strategy. 83% are doing training, active LinkedIn training at their firms. And I think 84% told us that they really consider the tool. This is the CMOs and the marketers, that they consider it to be a powerful tool for marketing and business development. But here's where I think we're going to see things move next. The majority of efforts, you know, from my vantage point, has been helping their attorneys to expand their profiles, to enhance their profiles, make them more dynamic, make sure that they are speaking to their qualifications, their credentials, the matters that they've worked on, using it as an opportunity to house their credentialing efforts, their publishing opportunities, speaking, etc. So the focus has very much been on taking their profiles to the next level. I think the next big opportunity for LinkedIn is to come up with strategies to mobilize your attorneys to distribute your best content, making sure that they're mobilized to distribute. And there's some new technologies and companies actually that are emerging to help attorneys and firms do that.
Wild stuff. John, the 2014 report is publicly available. Where can people go and find it?
They can go on our microsite, which is digitalandcontentsurvey.com. We actually have all 4 years of the data stored there. And I want to also give a special thanks to our survey partners this year, Soighauser Group. They've been a terrific partner the last 4 years, and American Lawyer Media as well.
Good stuff. John, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you very much.
And everyone should go and read that report. That's what we have for this week. If you'd like to see more of the stuff that we're working on, be sure to go check us out on YouTube, and you can always follow us on Twitter. I'm Pacchia. Thanks for watching.